Welcome back to the Hardware Unboxed podcast for episode 80. This is the GPU ranking episode. We're going to be going through this current generation of graphics cards and ranking them from best to worst. So 12 GPUs to be talking about. It's a pretty heated discussion. There's a lot of things that we don't really know where they should be ranked. A lot of conflicting stuff in that one. So yeah, we'll try our best to do the rankings. Let's get into it. Well, Steve, today we're doing the episode I think a lot of people are hotly anticipating, and by that I mean all three people that keep up with the podcast and some of the recurring things we do on this podcast. Today we'll be ranking the GPUs, or the current GPUs, because I think we're in a position now where all of the graphics cards, at least for the DIY market from this generation, will be released. Obviously, we're expecting supermodels at some point. I kind of count those as a different generation. Not sure about you, but we'll be ranking the GPUs today. How are you feeling about this momentous task in front of us?
Not great. I do hate doing this just because we do it on the fly and there's so many things to consider, and it's difficult to explain every angle for why it's there, and ultimately going to upset people because not that I care so much about that, but I do want to get the rankings reasonably right. Not that it actually means anything, because none of this is consumer advice really. It's just our thoughts on where the various GPUs fall, and I guess 1 to, what would it be, about 12 if you conclude the GRE?
I think there's 12 models. There's 14 models, including the limited release cards, the 9070 GRE and 9060.
Yeah,
There's 12 normal cards, I guess. So
yeah. That's the 16 and 8 gigabyte versions of the 5060 Ti and 9060 XT included into that to get you to 12.
That's right. Yeah, we've separated out those two models whenever there's any VRAM differences, because obviously those two products are quite different. Not sure whether we'll include the limited release cards in our rankings. I've included them on our little list just if we want to. But yeah, so we'll be getting into that in just a moment. Now, of course, I have mentioned briefly at the start here the RX 9060 is a new release, which is probably a good timing for us because we now know the Radeon RX 9060 does exist. So the non-XT model exists, but is also a model that will not be available for the DIY market. So I'm not sure whether that means it'll be largely just in OEM or system integrator cards, or what the go is for there. Maybe it's a limited release in some regions. That still seems a little unclear to me, but it is now listed on AMD's website as a separate model alongside their latest driver release. So the basics to this card are, as we sort of expected, it is a slightly cut down version of the RX 9060 XT. So instead of getting 2,048 cores, shader processors, you're down to 1,792. So it's a small reduction there. Exactly the same GDDR6 memory configuration, 128-bit memory bus. They've cut down the memory speed to 18 gigabits per second. So memory bandwidth drops from 320 gigabytes per second to 288 gigabytes per second. 8 gigabytes of memory on this one, as we sort of expected. Maximum board power is listed at 132 watts. So that's down from about 150 watts for the 8 gig 9060 XT. It'll be available this month at some point through OEM system integrators, that sort of thing. The boost clock is slightly lower than the 9060 XT as well. So based on this information, it's looking like about a 10% reduction in specifications and capabilities compared to the 9060 XT, but nothing too crazy. It is very much just the sort of cut down model that we speculated that they would do. What do you make of it not being available widely though? Like normally this sort of model would be available on the DIY market, but yeah, obviously this model isn't.
Well, the reason I imagine is because it's the same silicon. There's only so much defective dies they have. They want to sell them, but they can't make them. They haven't got enough supply to make it a retail product, I would have thought. So it'll appear in some systems, but it won't be like a guaranteed thing. It'll just be like, hey, there's the 9060 version of this computer and you can buy that. And it might even be a limited time only deal. Because we know when they've done those sort of parts in the past, probably the products that come to mind that people really wanted was like the Ryzen 3 3100 and 3300X. They were incredibly good value, and quad-core processors were certainly sufficient for entry-level gaming back then. And yeah, they sold out almost instantly, and then people just kept like refreshing for 6 months trying to get them again. So that would be a similar situation here, really, if it turned out that it was good value. So there's just not going to be the supply because they haven't actually spun up a different design. to facilitate those more entry level parts like Nvidia did.
Yeah, they can obviously keep their options open by making this die as well, even if it's DIY only now, and it turns out later that the market is more competitive or something, and they need an answer to an RTX 5050 for whatever reason or something like that. They can push this out if they really want to. But I think, as we've talked about in the last couple of podcasts, the obvious move that makes sense if supply, they don't have tons of cut down silicon, is just to lower the price of the 9060 XT 8 GB. You were talking about it being the least bad option if it was $250 US, for example. And they may as well just offer, instead of cutting down cards that could be the 9060 XT 8 GB, instead of cutting those down for no reason, the better option is just to sell the high performing model at a lower price if people have stopped buying it at $300, which is probably pretty close to doing. The amount of people that want to buy that at that price are probably no longer there. But yeah, obviously this model does exist now, so we know what the lineup is going to be like. Again, there's no reference model or anything. You're just going to see very basic, I would imagine, like simple dual fan, dual slot designs for the most part in OEM cards. So that really rounds out AMD's lineup, I would have thought. I don't think there'll be any more models in this lineup just yet. If they do, probably refreshes at some point down the line, but I'm not sure that they will. I think that
we could clickbait this video. We could be announcing some leaked 9080 XT or 9090 XT information, Tim. So think about the juicy potential for that sort of information. And all we just have to talk about it for a few minutes, just like speculate that could happen, or even what it would look like if it did happen, and then we'll put that on the thumbnail. And then by the time people get to this point in the video, they'll be very upset. But that's okay. They clicked on it.
Mission that's right. So, obviously we have great sources for this information. The 9080 XT is definitely a product that will exist. Obviously, AMD, they're going to spin up an entirely new GPU die for a much faster product. Something that they've planned for this whole time was a higher die that would unlock future capabilities. And boy, does that thing look impressive from what I'm hearing. Looking real good.
Yeah, RTX 5080 killer, I think was the language I heard. Anyway,
yeah, I agree with that. So
I'm already derailing things. We haven't even got started. No, I vote that we don't include the 9060 or the 9070 GRE just because they're not globally available, at least yet. We haven't reviewed them. We don't even have any internal testing for either product. So I'd rather skip those, which means we have 12 GPUs to rank. You agree?
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yes, I agree. I think the 9070 GRE, we've seen from other reviewers where that model performs, but obviously we haven't tested. But yeah, the 9060, we'd really only just be going on AMD's performance numbers, I guess, and pricing as well for those two models is very unclear. The 9070 GRE is available to purchase, I believe, as a DIY card in China, and it's priced something like $500, but it's not super clear whether that's in line with a global MSRP for the other models. And then the 9060, we don't have a price at all. So the price would be very important for a model like that. So based on now last time we did the rankings, people complained that there were no visuals to keep track of what we're doing. So this time I've opened up the wonderful Google Sheets to do some visuals for the podcast. So I've got the limited release cards here. I'm just going to delete them. There we go. Not there anymore. These are the models that we'll be ranking. So yeah, all of the current generation models here. I believe there's 8 GeForce cards and 4 Radeon models to get through. I think last time we started from the worst and worked our way up to the best. So I guess let's kick this one off with the worst model that's currently available. And I have a product in mind, but I'm interested to hear whether your product aligns with my product.
I'll be shocked if we haven't 50-50'd this.
Well, so you reckon it's the RTX 5050? It's pretty bad. Because I was going to say the RTX 5060 Ti 8 GB is the worst model.
Well, the 5050, yeah, gee, that's a tough one. There is a good argument to be had for both of them. The 5050, I was going to say because, it's the cheapest model. So you're hoping to get something there, but it's somehow, despite being the most affordable model, it's actually one of the worst value models in the entire lineup. I think it
That's true.
costs,
Yeah.
it's like 20% more expensive. The well, compared to a 9060 XT, for example, 8 GB, that costs 20% more. And I think that pricing, that's
Yep.
actually where it is at retail.
Yep.
So a 9060 XT is 20% more expensive, but a little over 40% faster. But even in the own GeForce lineup, it still doesn't make sense. Like, you're getting 30% more performance for 20% more money with the 5060. So
So it's
the
definitely
cost,
worse than a 5060.
it's worse value than a 5060 and much worse value than the AMD competition. They've all got 8 GB of VRAM, so I don't.
Right. So
They all suck in that sense.
I guess my argument for the 5060 Ti 8 GB being the worst is, well, first of all, the naming issue. The 5050 is just a 5050. The 5060 Ti, you've got the confusion between 16 and 8 GB. You search for 5060 Ti at retailers, the 8 GB model comes up first if you sort price lowest to highest, and then you're sort of getting that worst model positioned to you on those websites. But also, my thinking is more that this is the most powerful 8 GB
Expensive.
graphics card, and it's expensive. So
Yeah.
the 5050 is $250, but this is $380. And
Mm.
because it's so much more powerful, it could benefit a lot more from ultra settings, 1440p type gaming that a 5050 kind of can't do. So it opens you up to many more scenarios where the 8 GB is going to cripple you. Because like a 5050, 1080p gaming, esports, it's the cheapest model. Okay. But the 5060 Ti, you might be thinking of playing, the 16 GB model can play games at
Well,
1440p ultra settings.
at the end of the day, it has a $380 US MSRP for an 8 GB graphics card released in the year 2025. I think
Mm,
retail, it's maybe $10 off at the moment in the US. So $370 US. It's 670 Australian dollars, which is more than you'll pay for a 16 GB 9060 XT locally. So
mm.
yeah, you've convinced me for sure. I overlooked that. That is just off the MSRP alone, like almost $400 for an 8 GB graphics card in the year 2025 is absurd. So yeah, you've definitely convinced me on that one. I think that is the
Yeah.
worst product.
So I think that, it's a model that shouldn't exist. The 5050 8 GB is kind of like, it's not great, but you could you could justify an 8 GB entry level bottom of the stack model. It was always going to have 8 GB, but because there's a 16 GB model of the 5060 Ti, it just is a
Yeah,
card that
the
shouldn't
the, the
exist.
8 GB VRAM buffer was not the focus of the 5050 for me. It was more the
Mm,
fact that it was the worst value card and it was the cheapest. Normally, the value diminishes a bit as you get the more performance. The value's in the performance. Um,
that's right. The 3050 was quite bad the previous generation too, though, from that front. So it seems like NVIDIA has done this
yeah,
now
that
a
yeah.
couple of years in a row.
Yeah. So I think 5050 would be the next worst GPU.
Yeah, I agree, 100%. So in 11th position, the 5050, 12th position, 5060 Ti 8 GB.
Mhm.
So now we get into, there's probably a few other models that jump out to me as being poor. The 5060 is obviously there, and then we have to consider the 9060 XT 8 GB. Are there any other models that you think would be sort of the next most bad of the remaining options?
Like, this is why these ranking things are so hard. Because for me, the thing that I've taken most offense to, or that what's upset me the most about this current generation, is the fact that we have mainstream 8 GB GPUs. Like I've said, they're an abomination.
Hmm.
They're actively damaging PC gaming at this point in time. You've got it's all the things I've talked about over and over again. You've got half-decade old consoles that can allocate more VRAM. They're just a huge problem, and with every game release, every game announcement, we're seeing it become more and more of a problem. And, these products have just been released. I'm talking about 3-4 years from now. So I
Hmm.
think any 8 GB GPU released in 2025, especially if it's priced over $200 US, is just a complete and utter abomination.
Hmm.
So the 8 GB 9060 XT, while, there have been discounts and stuff, and in the current market, it does represent reasonably good value. It's still, a crap product and it hasn't got below $200. So And it's extremely unlikely that that's ever going to happen. So yeah, the 9060 XT 8GB has to be in there somewhere. I don't know if it's well, it's how does it rank against the 5060? I think the 5060's probably
It's a bit slower, isn't it? The 9060 XT 8GB faster, right?
The 9060 XT 8GB, it depends on the games and stuff. They're the same price, similar performance. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure which one wins there between, because the 5060 Ti is a little bit faster depending on the games as well. So, because I mean, you found native TA in your 15 games, I think it was, that the GeForce GPU, so the 5060 Ti 16GB, was 5% faster than the 9060 XT 16GB, but then 10% faster when using upscaling.
Something around that. Yeah.
So, and I've found them across a slightly larger sample of games using like native settings with sort of ultra to high. It's 5% or less. So, yeah, the 8GB version is probably going to be similar in terms of performance. It's going to come down to the game sample and all that sort of stuff. They're going to trade blows. So I don't think it's really, I don't feel comfortable saying that the 5060 is faster than the 9060 XT 8GB or the 9060 XT 8GB is faster than the 5060. I think they're very similar in terms of performance at the same price tag. So for me, the 9060 XT 8GB is kind of the worst product of the two, just for the simple fact that the name is extremely misleading. And we penalized the GeForce RTX 5060 Ti 8GB for that.
Yeah.
And that sits lower in the rankings because, as we've discussed, the price is crazy, whereas the 8GB version is $300 US of the 9060 XT opposed to $380 US. So there is that. I would be inclined to, in 10th position, put the 9060 XT 8GB. That would, I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because there's kind of two scenarios, right? There's the VRAM scenario, and I think you've shown that AMD GPUs perform better when they're in a scenario where VRAM is potentially on the edge or an issue because of PCI 5.0 times 16 as opposed to times 8. But then on the other end of the scale, if you're within 8GB, the 5060 does have access to things like DLSS 4 in a much broader range of games. So you kind of got like two features, so to speak there. And then obviously the issues with pricing, the performance of the cards isn't that far apart. I think the 9060 XT, as you said, is probably similar to a little faster.
But the criteria that we're ranking these on, I'm assuming, is value, price, performance.
Yeah, it's everything. Yeah.
Sort of features.
The name is bad. The 5060 name isn't bad.
It's more the consumer focus side of things. And the name plays into that. The way that AMD or NVIDIA released the products and any shenanigans there isn't included in this. I
think that's fair. Yep.
So while the 5060 had all the shenanigans going on, it was the most controversial release, I'd say, of the entire generation. The 9060 XT 8GB had its own fair share of controversies. AMD said they would sample anyone that asked. We asked. Gamers Nexus asked. They sampled us, but then other people in other regions didn't get their cards, and they sent a 7700 XT to Linus, which is kind of funny. That's very AMD of them. But anyway, I'm locking in the Radeon RX 9060 XT 8GB for 10th.
Yeah. So that means that the 5060 will put into 9th, because I think we're not really considering any other models.
Yep.
I think that looks pretty good because, I guess if someone was coming to me being like, I have exactly $300 to spend, what am I going to be purchasing? Like, what should I buy? And I'm like, okay, well, your options are 5060 or 9060 XT 8GB. I'm not like rushing out and being like, get this over that. It's like, eh. And when you've got a model that then has a worse product name that's more confusing and stuff, I think for me that's probably the clinching factor of it being ranked lower. But I imagine some people think the other way around, that we probably should have had the 8GB 9060 XT ahead because it's a little faster. I'm not sure what people think of that.
Well, it's it's a tough one. And again, as I said, it comes down to the games you're testing and all that sort of stuff as to working out which one is the the winner there in terms of performance, and I think you could run, you know, a heap of different tests and have one above the other. So they're close enough where I don't care for which one's faster because they're just so close it becomes an irrelevant statistic.
So these are obviously the 4 models that we generally wouldn't recommend. I think the rest of the cards that we still have to rank can be recommended depending on pricing and things like that. So I think it gets a lot more difficult from this position because obviously you've got some really good models here and some okay models. So like which of the remaining 8 graphics cards sort of stands out to you to be the next worst?
Well, in terms of pricing, it gets us to the 16 gigabyte cards. So the 9060 XT and 5060 Ti.
I think those are pretty good buys though.
They
generally.
are. Yeah. Yep. So I'm just saying in terms of like, you know, the product SKU where that would get us to. So
yeah,
probably skip those, work a bit further up. So the next sort of GPUs to me that jump out as being not great would probably be like the RTX 5070, mostly because of the 12 gigabyte VRAM buffer, and then probably the RTX 5080 because that represents weak value. And I'm not sure what the pricing is going on in the US. I had a look just before.
Pretty bad. It's pretty bad.
It's like $1,300 US. There might be like a $1,250 US option, but most of the retailers, their most affordable model was $1,300 US, which is $300 US over MSRP. And already at MSRP, it was a bad deal. The 5070 Ti is a better value product. That's only about $50 US over MSRP at the moment. I've seen plenty of examples for $800. So why you would pay $500 US more to go from a 5070 Ti to an RTX 5080, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a reasonable contender, especially because of the price, like the real world price angle. You know, the 5080 at $1,000, if it was actually available at that price, I wouldn't have been like, yeah, that's definitely the 8th best graphics card. Like I probably would have maybe swung more to like a 5070 or something like that. When you're talking about a model that is, what is it? It's like 10% faster than a 4080 or 4080 Super. It's like not hugely faster.
It's like 14% faster than the 5070 Ti, but a 33% higher MSRP. And it's, well, based on that data, it's like 63% more expensive in the US. It's 27% more expensive here in Australia. It has the same 16 gigabyte VRAM buffer as the 5070 Ti. So it's mostly the 5070 Ti that I'm comparing it to come to that conclusion. So
yeah, like obviously it's bad from that sense. I think where I was coming from is an additional angle is it's also bad if you had the opportunity, I guess, to buy a 4080 or a 4080 Super towards the end of last year. So we're not talking that long ago where you could buy 4080 Supers for about $1,000 and they've jacked up the price on a very similar graphics card to $1,300. So there's just not like, that's a really bad deal.
So I guess it would either be the 5080 or the 5070. I don't think either of the Radeon RX 9070 series GPUs would qualify for that position. You know, like the 5070 Ti versus 9070 XT, the GeForce GPU is 11% more expensive in the US, which is a very small margin. It's 25% more here in Australia. It's meant to be 25% more expensive. So the Australian pricing is more in line. The performance is much the same. You know, you could maybe give a 5% edge to the GeForce GPU, again, depending on the games you play. So, but you've got less VRAM. So I'm trying to work out now, like the 5070, where that stacks up in everything.
Yeah, like,
I think, sorry, the 5070 Ti. And then the 5070 would be compared to the 9070. So the Radeon GPU is 9% more expensive in the US, 8% more expensive here in Australia. They're meant to be the same price. But the 9070.
So is this the 9070 XT is more expensive or the 9070 is more expensive?
I was comparing the 9070 XT with the 5070 Ti first, but I was getting ahead of myself. We actually want to work out which product is the next worst out of the RTX 5080 and 5070.
Yeah.
To do that, though, you've kind of got to work out how the 5070 compares to its competition, which would be the 9070, right?
Yeah, that's right. I think the competition in that price range is they're almost in some ways they should all be related, right? Because the 9070 XT MSRP is only supposed to be $50 more than a 5070. But I think with current pricing, especially in the US and actually quite a lot of other regions, there's more separation there. So the 9070 XT has crept up to be more of a 5070 Ti direct price competitor.
Yeah.
So we're left with largely 5070 versus 9070. Whereas really, I think you said in your review, the 9070 XT is the model you would buy compared to all of those three, and even compared to the 5070 Ti as well. So you've kind of got four models there that it should be beating, but it doesn't.
That's where it gets really confusing because the 9070 XT, so I know this is really confusing, guys, but the Radeon RX 9070 XT, meant to be $600 US. It has met that MSRP or the equivalent in other regions, but over in the US, it's currently $720 US. It's 1,200 Australian dollars.
Yeah.
But then the 9070, so the non-XT version, which is only meant to be $50 less, is currently $120 less in the US because that model's only $50 above MSRP at $600 US. So,
and the 5070 you can find for $550 currently on Newegg.
Yeah, so in the US, the 9070 non-XT makes way more sense in terms of value than the XT version. But then here in Australia, it's horrible. Like PC case gear, you can get a 9070 XT for 1,200 Australian dollars. Whereas the 9070s, the cheapest models are $20 Australian less. So it's like they're the same price. So I don't know why you would buy an RX 9070 here in Australia, but then it would be the go-to option in the US. So it's so region dependent as well. So that makes this extremely complicated as to which one you actually pick. So I don't even know how the hell do we navigate that?
Yeah, so I think just to start with, the vibe I'm getting is that the 5080 is worse than those models. So I think
it certainly is right now at $1,300 US. How long has it been $1,300 US for? I haven't really tracked the price of it.
I mean, it launched in February, didn't it? Or the end of January? Yeah, I forget.
Is this just like since the Super Series has started getting rumors as the price crept up, or has it been poorly priced and that's just how it's been? I honestly haven't paid attention to it, so I don't know. If it's always been like $1,300 US, then I think, that product really sucked.
Right. So what I'm going to do then is look at the MSI Ventus is currently $1,300 on Newegg. So let me just have a look at the PC part picker because they've got a nice pricing graph and we can see how long that model has been, $1,500. So looked like it launched very briefly in February for about $1,140 US, then quickly jumped up to, you could buy direct from the MSI website for $1,270 up until April, and it's gone up since then to $1,400 and has only just recently come down to $1,300 as of, halfway through July. So that's not great. I'll just check another model. There's a couple of others like Zotac and PNY. Let's see whether any of those are different. Yeah, very similar story with like the PNY model. The PNY OC version of the RTX 5080 looks like it was listed at Newegg for $1,000 for a while. I'm not sure whether that was in stock because I remember checking back then that probably wouldn't have been. But then since about May, it's jumped up to over $1,400. Depends exactly where you get it from. Like it is listed right now, for example, at Best Buy for $1,000, but it's out of stock. So,
well, I think at the very least we'd be ranking it under the 5070 Ti.
Yeah,
and probably the Radeon 9070 series as well.
Yeah.
So that would be sort of a best case result. But given the pricing and whatnot, and I just think for an 80 series GPU, which has sort of been the go-to, I think it massively under-delivered. The 5070 Ti has just always been better value and a more attractive product, especially given that they both have 16 gigabytes of VRAM. I think if it had like 20, 24 gigabytes of VRAM, the 5080, there'd be a little more to consider there. Longevity and stuff like that. But
I think as well,
$1,000 or over $1,000 for 16 gigabytes is pretty crap.
I think as well, the positioning of the 80 relative to the 90 historically has been a lot closer. So when you bought like a 4080, you were getting, not a 4090, but you were getting reasonably close in some scenarios to that card. Whereas the 5080 and 5090, the gap has grown a lot larger. And so not only are you stuck on 16 gig, there's just this huge chasm. I feel like the $1,300 price would be a lot more justified if it was closer to the 5090, like it probably should be, like if it was a cut down version or something, and if
Mhm,
it had 24 gig, but it does
mhm,
neither of those things. It's like half, you're getting half of a 5090. And while, yeah,
mhm.
the 5090 is probably $3,000 when we get to looking at that, it's, yeah, not great. So I'm going to put this in eighth. I think it's,
It
as
seems,
things currently
yeah,
stand.
to me, it seems crazy putting a 5080 in eighth, but yeah, I mean, it's probably justified. It seems to make sense
Yeah.
to me. So we'll just, yeah, the pricing alone just kills it, especially current pricing.
Yeah, I
So
agree.
yeah,
So the cards we're sort of also discussing around this time has been the 5070, 9070, and then the XT slash TI models of those.
the 9070. Sorry. I got distracted. No, sorry. I'm looking at the 5090. And
Yeah.
I want us to circle to that because that obviously stands out on its own. You know, best performance. It's
Mm.
hands down the performance king. It has no competition, plenty of VRAM, dumb price, sketchy availability for most of the product's life. Sorry if I've just hijacked this, but
No, I think it's reasonable though, right?
well,
Because
I actually have no idea where we put that because I think in past rankings we've gone with the flagship GPU as kind of the best GPU under the justification that it's the only product that was exciting or brought something new to the table. Because was the 4090 number one? I feel like it
it
was.
was, yeah. I think we settled on that very quickly as well. Like
Yeah.
it wasn't much of a debate. It was like because the 4090 for a start was much more powerful than a 3090.
Hmm.
So you were getting like 50% more performance, and the price didn't creep up by that much compared to a 3090. So for high-end buyers, it made a lot of sense. Like it was a great product from that sense. Obviously, it wasn't the best value, and it was also helped by the fact that the rest of the lineup was pretty underwhelming. Like there wasn't like these great, oh, I can recommend that because of value or this because of value. It was kind of like, yeah, the value of all those other models is pretty mediocre. So that's why it stood out. Whereas I think with the 5090, there's models where, I could sort of get excited about recommending to someone something like a 9060 XT 16 gigabyte, or depending on pricing, like a 5060 Ti 16 gigabyte. Those are reasonable GPUs. I think the 9060 XT in particular is quite well priced. So you can sort of go, oh yeah, that's an interesting, that's moving things forward a little bit for mid-range buys. We didn't get that last gen, but then a 5090 is the fastest model.
And what is it, like 20 to 30% faster than a 4090? Somewhere there? I don't actually remember.
I think you said it was about 25% faster
Okay.
on average.
Okay.
Its
So there you
current
go.
pricing in the US, there's a Zotac model available for $2,400 on Newegg right now. Most other models, $2,500, $2,600. That's sort of a typical price. So obviously the $2,000 MSRP doesn't exist, but it's inflated to the same level as a 5080. So
So
5080 is about 30% more. This is about that.
yeah, so the 4090 got number one last time. This sort of builds on the 4090. The 5090 is faster again. Not a mega uplift, but still, a notable one over an already fast product. Path
Mhm.
tracing, high quality ray tracing, all that stuff can be enjoyed on that product.
It's got one of the largest performance uplifts gen on gen in the GeForce lineup. So there's that as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. It's that's what I'm saying. It's one of the more impressive, noteworthy upgrades of really, you can't fault it other than the dumb price. I don't even think power consumption's that much of a concern. I mean, yes, there's the melting connectors and all that, which is not ideal.
Mhm.
Um, uh, don't have too much to say about that. I mean, sadly, in a way, we haven't been able to run into those problems at all on any 4090 or 5090. But of course, that's not to say it isn't a problem. It's just somehow, despite running them for years now, we've never had that problem. But I'm sure that's true for most people. I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't know how much I weight that into being a problem or taking points off the 5090. Um, for me,
Mm.
the main problem is the dumb price, but then people were paying it and you couldn't get one. So I mean, the market sets the prices, right? So how dumb is it for a premium flagship product if people are queuing up to buy them? Um,
Yeah, I don't know how much of a launch issue melting connector sort of thing is because there's obviously as well driver issues with GeForce GPUs for a while there, and we haven't really factored that into this at all either. So
I think
I'm not
like the driver side of things, while it gets a lot of attention, I've always found GeForce and Radeon drivers overall to be similar. When people are banging on about how bad the GeForce drivers are, I've had when testing, I would say I've almost always had similar amount or degree of problems using either product. It's just, I suppose if you buy a GeForce GPU and the game you really want to play has issues, then you're really going to fixate on those issues. But looking at the bigger picture, testing GeForce and Radeon across a wide range of games, typically speaking, they have similar issues overall. At least that's been my experience in the last few generations anyway.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. So I don't think the 5090 is like a 7th place GPU. I think it's
like that's the problem with the 5090. Like I could put it in 7th or I could put it in 1st. Like I could really make an argument for either one of those positions, which is why I find positioning the RTX 5090 extremely difficult, like giving that an accurate ranking.
Let's put it this way, right? Like if you're a mid-range buyer, would you necessarily recommend, hey, just go out and buy an RTX 5070? It's like, that's one option, but there's also other options. If you're a high-end flagship buyer, you're recommending these days a 5090.
The 5090 is a hard product to recommend. It's 4,200 Australian dollars, right?
Mm-hmm.
If 4,200 Australian dollars isn't much money to you, then you would just, sure, get one. Because, I mean, it is technically a phenomenal product. Like, it is an engineering marvel. As far as gaming products, gaming hardware goes, it's the pinnacle. It's the best thing we've ever had. It's really amazing. You're not going to get a GeForce RTX 5090 and be like, oh, this thing is not very good or it sucks. Like, it's mind-blowing how good it is. So you're not going to be disappointed from that perspective. But at the same time, it's 4,200 Australian dollars, which I think would be roughly what you probably spent on your car. I actually don't know.
No, I did actually spend more than that, surprisingly.
Okay.
Well, it's probably worth about that now.
Yeah, okay. You could certainly buy your car, I would have thought, for that much money. And your car's a perfectly reliable car, which has been proven over how many years have you had that thing for now?
Like a decade, yeah.
But I guess we're not comparing, like, it's two totally different things. It's an irrelevant comparison, so it's not worth making, but it's a funny thing also to point out.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
I struggle to I just struggle with that, the fact that it's 4,200 Australian dollars. And so if money means nothing or that's just not a concern for you, then but then how do you rank that? It's like
I think as well, like, of course there's people where money isn't super concerning, but from my perspective, right, I got sent an RTX 5090 for free from NVIDIA, and so did you. And we've got board partner models and all that sort of thing, right?
Therefore, number one, best.
Well, so for us, right, we're not spending $4,000 on this graphics card. And even with that, like, I think it's quite an underwhelming upgrade over a 4090. Like my system right now, my gaming rig has a 4090 in it. Now, if I was given a 5090, obviously, yay, I was given one. But outside of that, it is only 25% faster. When I went from the 3090 to the 4090.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, but
it's high-end buyers.
It's hard to call it underwhelming though, when it's quite a substantial performance uplift over what was already a mind-blowingly fast product.
Yeah, I get it from that perspective, but where I'm coming from, right, is if you're a high-end buyer, they're the most likely to upgrade every generation. Like you want to be at the best of the best. So you're going from 2080 Ti, 3090, 4090, so on. 2080 Ti to 3090, great upgrade. 3090 to 4090, great upgrade. 4090 to 5090, it's like, the gains, they're rolling off here. I've got multi-frame generation now, but there's no other like.
But the gains on a lot of the other cards were even worse. So
I
we've
know,
already
right? But people,
and then it's
people
like,
buying a 5070 though aren't upgrading from a 4070. They're upgrading from a 3070 or whatever that was.
but then you could
even
just say
older.
that people upgrading to a 5090 could do it for a 3090. I see what you're saying, but while it's logical and it makes sense, it's also somewhat broken logic as well, depending on how you look at it. And the other thing as well is, if I said to you, hey, Tim, I can give you one GPU from the current generation of GPUs and you can pick which one it is.
Okay, yeah, sure. I'm picking a 5090, right?
so it is the best. As I'm saying, it's got no competition as the best of the best. It's the best product. It is number one, but can you rank it number one? And that's I actually don't have the answer for this. Like I said, I could put it in seventh or I could put it in first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'd be thinking of ranking it somewhere around fourth. I mean, I think there's going to be just based on my, I guess, vibes, really, which is, I guess, what this is all based off, right? Is there's more exciting, good value products to recommend over a 5090. The 5090 is fast, so it's not bad, so it shouldn't be in the lower parts. But then, I'd probably rank it ahead of, like I would have a 5090 ahead of a 5070, for example.
Yeah, like if a friend came to me and they're like, I've got money to burn, I'm not too fast, but I don't want to actually just throw money away. Like I don't want to waste money. They're not super phased on ray tracing or whatever. They might dabble in it, but they just generally just want a game. Like,
yeah.
Then you're probably looking more at a 5070 Ti/9070 XT, in my opinion. That's what I would be recommending. So
yeah, I agree.
So given that, do we drop it, down from say first? And again, I'm probably overthinking the rankings because ultimately it's not buying advice or a top 5 best GPUs type video. We're just ranking them based on our thoughts and feelings and stuff like that. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to make you pick where the RTX 5090 goes, and I'm just going to continue talking about GPUs.
Right. So yeah, I mean, like I said, I think I would put it in somewhere like fourth or third. I mean, it just depends where things like a 5070 Ti, 56,
I have no idea how we're going to work that out. So let's just continue on with the other GPUs.
Yeah,
then.
so
I don't know how this gets resolved.
I'm just putting it in fourth for now, and we can
just sitting it there.
I'm just going to sit it there for now.
Okay.
Right. So
all right.
Now my vibes for seventh spot is probably the 5070.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too.
Maybe the 9070.
It has to be one of those two. Well, yeah. So we talked about this just earlier. So the Radeon GPU is more expensive in the US and Australia, and it's meant to be the same price.
Mm-hmm.
So the 9070 is worse value in that sort of aspect, but it does have the 16 gigabytes of VRAM. So I don't know how you work that out.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. I looked at, I think it was Tech Epiphany on Twitter was posting about, the Amazon sales where the 5070 is like ahead by a huge margin over the rest of the models. And I think it's probably because of that pricing discrepancy in the US right now. Yeah, I think
realistically over the next 3-4 years, how much of a difference do you believe? Because when you're at a 5070 class product, and this is always where these VRAM discussions become critical, with a 5070 sort of a mid-range, I know mid-range, it's a far cry from the 5090, but what are you expecting from that product? Like how much, when you spend at the moment at retail $550 US or 1,000 Australian dollars on an RTX 5070, now, next year, the year after, how much compromise are you expecting that you would have to make? And are you buying that card to like, I want the best ray tracing I can get. I've got $550 US. It's probably going to be better than the Radeon competition because, Blackwell better ray tracing. So I'm going to get that. So you're prioritizing the best visuals you can get. So from that sort of angle, how much does having the extra 4 gigabytes of VRAM really influence how much of a headache that card's going to be to live with over the next few years? how much manually tuning of settings are you going to have to do to work out, like, is the stuttering because of VRAM, or is it drivers, or is it my computer? What the hell's going on? Yeah, it's a tough one to work out. Like, is the 5070 worth taking that potential sacrifice for DLSS 4 support and just the GeForce experience, let's say?
Yeah, I guess for me, right, like if I'm looking at the lineup, the 5060 Ti is like the 1440p Ultra 60 FPS card. Like that's relatively what it can do in most games. The 5070, I'm probably buying that because I want like a more consistent high refresh rate experience. So I'm willing to spend the extra money because I have a 1440p 140 for its display or whatever. I want to be hitting like 80 plus FPS more often. And then the 5070 Ti is sort of the product that you get because you want to do more ray tracing. Like 5070 can do it, obviously, but 5070 Ti is better. It's got 16 gig. It's better. So you'll be running games even more high frame rate. You might be dabbling in 4K, or alternatively, you're turning on ray tracing more substantially than you would be. So that's how I sort of think of it. Now, the 5070 today for 1440p high refresh rate, in a lot of scenarios, it can do it. So the question is then like, okay, it's fine now, but how long am I willing to, like, for example, if I had always bought a $500 card, then how long has it been okay for me to accept, if I bought a 3070 at launch or whatever, 1440p high refresh, over time though, it's going to go from high refresh to 60 FPS to below. Now I'm having to turn down settings from ultra to medium or whatever. And that's been over the course of about 5 years. So to me, I feel like the VRAM is not a deal breaker from that sense.
Yeah, I feel a little bit the other way because I feel like, and these are feelings, people. I feel like the 5070 at best will age as well as the 3070 did. So I guess you'd have to ask 3070 owners how well they felt the 3070 aged with its 8 gigabytes of VRAM, whether that was fine, they didn't have any problems. And I really think that would be best case as well. I think like the 5070, 12 gigabytes of VRAM may age worse, but it's a guess. I don't know. I'm not really sure whether we go the 5070 or the 9070 next.
Yeah,
and then the 5060 Ti 16 gigabytes still pretty expensive for what that is as well. Like at retail, I believe the cheapest model is $450 US.
I mean, the 9060 XT is obviously better.
Yeah, but what I'm getting at is, does seventh place, is that occupied by the 5070, the 9070, or the 5060 Ti 16 gigabyte?
So I guess like, is the 5060 Ti 16 gigabyte better than a 5070? Like it's worse value, but it's got a decent amount of VRAM, and it's not the worst performer.
Yeah, it's $100 US cheaper right now at retail.
Yeah, so that's the gap is closed, right? Because it's more expensive than it should be because a 5070 is $550. It should be $130 cheaper,
$120, yeah.
And obviously then, because it's up a little bit, it's also now, like $100 more than a 9060 XT 16 gig? I'm not sure what that's available for.
No, that's $370 US for the 90. It's okay. Also, they're both $20 US above MSRP, the 16 gigabyte cards.
Yeah, so it's not a great buy. Obviously, there's the whole DLSS versus FSR thing, and I think coming back to the 5070 versus 9070, obviously one of the reasons you'd be more inclined to buy a 5070 now is because of much broader DLSS 4 support. But if you're talking about 3 years from now, that landscape could look very different. And the way AMD's been able to get FSR 4 onto games has been reasonable. So if you're looking 3 years from now, I'm guessing over the lifespan of the card, especially if you play newer games, that the 9070 is going to have FSR 4 in most newer games that you're playing. Again, that's a guess because we don't know. We're sort of predicting the future. DLSS 4 support is going to be good either way. So there's that angle. Like
I think if the 9070 was at the US MSRP of $550,
yeah,
you would pick 7th place for the RTX 5070.
Yeah.
But I think with the RX 9070 being $50 US over MSRP, which relative to the 9070 XT makes it good value in the US, but horrifically bad value here in Australia. And again, I don't know how it works in other regions. So I don't know. I'm sort of leaning more towards the RX 9070 being in 7th place.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, because I think, at the MSRPs, again, like if all the models were the MSRPs, you'd recommend the 9070 XT, but the MSRP is only $50 lower than the 9070 XT, which was a mistake from AMD's part. Not that that's played out that way because of the actual real world pricing. But I think if everything was MSRP, you'd probably want the 9070 to be cheaper than a 5070 to strongly recommend it. Whereas it's actually the other way around. So I think, based on that and everything that you've said, the Radeon 9070 in 7th, and then it's like, are we saying the 5070 is worse than a 5060 Ti 16 gigabyte? Or is this 5060 Ti? Because we're talking about the 5070 is a good performing card with not enough VRAM, and the price to performance is okay. But the 5060 Ti has enough VRAM, but the price to performance is poor relative to like a 9060 XT. So which way do you go there?
I'm not sure is the answer. I was actually going to just have a look quickly at the cost per frame based on MSRP. The 50s at MSRP, the 5070 is slightly better value than the 5060 Ti 16 gigabyte, if that helps at all.
Right. And also right now, as we're doing this ranking, the 5060 Ti is above MSRP, but the 5070 is at MSRP.
So I think the 5060 Ti 16 gigabyte takes out 6th spot.
Yeah, I think it's based on that, it is the worst model.
Mm-hmm.
That said, it's not the worst card if you had, like if you, for
example,
example.
It's a perfectly fine product.
Yeah, that's right. Like if you, for whatever reason, never bought Radeon cards, you just bought GeForce models, the 5060 Ti 16 gigabyte is one of the better $400 cards they've made in a while, or a roughly 400.
It's also the cheapest
range.
Card they have with 16 gigabytes of VRAM. It has the same amount of VRAM as a 5080.
Yeah, that's right.
For
so like
almost a third of the price. So.
I think last time we ranked the 4060 Ti 16 gigabyte quite badly because it was $500.
Yeah, the performance was also not. It was nowhere. It was pretty bad.
Yeah, it was the same performance as a 3060 Ti. So that was bad. Yep. So yeah, I'm quite comfortable with that, which I guess then puts the 5070 next. I think that we're not considering any of the other models being worse than a 5070. Now I've put the 5090 in 4th. I'm going to remove that from the rankings just for now, but I think
I thought that might happen.
I think because I'm thinking it could be 3rd or a little bit. So we're left.
4 products.
So just for people who are listening and not watching our sort of rankings on the YouTube channel, the current models that we've got left are the 5090, the 5070 Ti, the 9070 XT, and the 9060 XT 16 gigabyte. And our current rankings so far, from 5th down to 12th, 5070, 5060 Ti 16 gigabyte, 9070 non-XT, 5080, 5060, 9060 XT 8 gigabyte, the 5050, and the worst being the 5060 Ti 8 gigabyte. So there's 4 models remaining. All of these, I think we're now in the good tier. Like all of these, I'd be like, yeah, you should be pretty happy with these models in one way or another. Obviously, we've got 2 directly competing cards, 5070 Ti, 9070 XT. And then we've got, the best value mainstream model from AMD, and then the flagship.
Well, how the hell do we rank the 9070 XT? It's just difficult to compare with. Like, so the 5070 Ti is what I would typically compare the 9070 XT to. So I guess that's what we'd sort of have to do to rank them. Because they're both remaining, right?
Yeah.
So I guess we're trying to work out which one of those goes ahead of the other.
Yeah.
And so in the US, the GeForce GPU costs 11% more. It's 25% more here in Australia, which it's meant to be at MSRP. The GeForce GPU's 25% more. I think it's fair to say the performance between the 5070 Ti and 9070 XT is about the same. like I said,
Yep.
sure, if you want to give a 5% edge to the GeForce GPU, whatever, but I've typically deem anything 5% or less in either direction to be, much of a muchness. So then you've got other things to consider, like ray tracing performance, upscaling, all that sort of stuff, which generally is a tick in the direction of the 5070 Ti.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think given how poorly the 9070 XT is priced in the US, you would clearly buy the 5070 Ti. But then here in Australia, you're looking at having to pay a 25% premium for the GeForce GPU for similar performance. It's 300 Australian dollars, up from 1,200 to $1,500. It's like not crazy, but it's still a fair chunk of change.
Yeah, it is. I think what you said in your day one review of the 9070 XT in terms of like where it should be positioned relative to the 5070 Ti, I haven't seen anything that would change my mind about that. Like I think what you said day one, it needs to be about 15% better value, still holds true today. Like it's not like Radeon's features have accelerated massively to close the gap since launch, or the performance has changed substantially since launch. I think that margin holds true. So it's just a matter of
what region do we pick?
Yeah, so I remember when I looked at 10 regions a couple of months ago, Australia was one of the more favorable regions to Radeon. I think in Europe, it was heading towards the 5070 Ti being the better value card. It just depended on where you looked.
Mm-hmm.
Over time, it seems like in Europe, they've been able to get their 5070 Ti down to MSRP a bit more easily than the 9070 XT. I think if we're talking like Australian pricing or MSRP, the 9070 XT is the better product. I think, though, on a global sense and how things have gone since launch, it's like in a lot of regions for a lot of the time since launch to now, it's pretty difficult to recommend the 9070 XT at the prices that it's been available at. Like in the US a couple of months ago, it was like over $800 US.
Yeah, and I know people get pissy about the fake MSRP thing, and the 9070 XT was meant to be $600 US. But while I get that, and you're absolutely right, we can't really criticize the 9070 XT of that, since the 5070 Ti has done that and sometimes worse. Like it was $900 US for a long time. So I don't think that's something we can consider. It is the price, again, is a consumer thing, but I don't think we can take fake MSRPs and penalize one company more so than the other, because they're both guilty of it. And in the case of the 9070 XT and 5070 Ti, I think they're guilty to pretty much the same degree.
Yeah, it's a market talk situation on that one. Like the prices that we're currently seeing in the market are because of the level of people buying the cards at those prices. So with both parties sort of guilty of it and the market sort of determining what the prices should be, I guess, that's the situation we're in. Now, I think, we've got the 5090 still to rank as well. Related to the 5090, though, is the whole, what is the technically superior card? Now, I think the 5070 Ti is the technically superior model. Like it's a better, if there was no pricing and you could take one card for free out of the 5070 Ti and 9070 XT, the 5070 Ti is better. So does that factor in?
It definitely factors in. I mean, it's something that adds towards the value of the product. And, with and that's where the region pricing becomes challenging. For me, it's pretty simple. If you're looking at a 25% premium to get the GeForce GPU, you get the 9070 XT. If it's 15%, it becomes tough. You could go either way. And less than 15%, you get the 5070 Ti. That's pretty much it for me.
Yeah,
and then how to rank it, I don't know. I don't know what to do with this one at all. I really, and then whether we put them ahead of the 5090, I don't know either. Like, again, what metric takes priority to rank these? Because if a friend came to me and I knew they were well off, but they didn't want to like waste money, and they were gaming a bit, but they just wanted a recommendation, I would probably recommend a 5070 Ti or 9070 XT. Because really, the 5090 is not even something you really recommend. It's like someone who comes to you like, oh, should I buy Tim's Mazda or a Ferrari? Like, who's making that recommendation? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's a little bit the same to a less extreme degree with the RTX 5090. You just buy the 5090 because you want the 5090. You can justify it, either reasonably so or otherwise, but it's something you can justify. You want it, you buy it.
Yeah.
So again, that doesn't really help us with the ranking, though. I don't think too much.
No. So I guess maybe a different way of looking at it is what should we put first? Is the 9060 XT being clearly better than a 5060 Ti and a good mainstream GPU? Does that mean it's the best overall product in our rankings, ranking above the other three options? So there's that option. The second option is we pick the 5070 Ti or 9070 XT, whichever one we think is better, and put that in first because of the reasons you were saying. If you're sort of high and buy, it's the card you recommend. Or do we put the 5090 in first because it's the fastest and best model? Because really the only justification for the 5090 being first is that it's the best and fastest card. Everything else is against it. It's too expensive. The performance uplift was underwhelming. It's overpriced relative to the MSRP, all that stuff, right? So
yeah, I think if it's from a more sensible value focused stance, which people argue that's just a dumb thing to prioritize because that's not what the 5090 is about, and I don't disagree. But I think if it just comes down to how impressive each product is for what it does, I think the 9060 XT would be right up there because it has, like the 5090, it has no competition. At $350 US, $370 US at retail, 600 Australian dollars. It's not much more expensive than the 8GB version, which sucks. And then if you look over to the GeForce stuff, here in Australia, it's cheaper, substantially cheaper than the 8GB 5060 Ti. And in the US, they're the same price. So,
I mean, that sounds like a pretty good buy to me.
Yeah, if someone was on, they were more budget conscious, so they just wanted a really good value product, I'd be recommending the 9060 XT 16GB, and I'd be doing so universally, like whether you're in the US or Australia, that would be my recommendation. So whether that gets at first place or not, I'm not sure, but it's a product that I'm personally more excited about for if I was doing build guides or stuff like that. And I think it's a product that services a significantly larger portion of the market. So it's a more relevant product for considerably more people than an RTX 5090. But again, it's just the rankings. It comes down to what we're prioritizing. But I think the 9060 XT probably deserves to be ranked first, like rewarded with a first place ranking, given all that it's achieved for the common gamer, let's say.
Well, I think that's a big part of it as well, is that the 5090 is coming into a market of high-end buyers that have had access to very good performance gains generation over generation for at least 5 years, probably 5 to 7 years, if not longer. You buy the best, you've always gotten more and more and more. And the 5090, as I sort of said earlier, is one of the least impressive of those options that we've got recently. The 9060 XT, though, is entering into a market where last time we were doing these rankings, we pretty much put every product around this price last. Like whether it was joint last or effectively last, all of those models were bad. And then if you think back even further, more generations and generations, people wanting to buy these mainstream models around this sort of price have gotten just screwed over year after year after year for whatever reason. Like the 3060 Ti 8GB for $400 would have been a reasonable card for a lot of people in 2020, except most people couldn't buy it at that price, so they got screwed there. And then the next generation models were really bad. And then you go back even further, getting back to like the 2060 Super sort of times and that sort of thing. Not amazing products, I wouldn't have said. And then obviously you're back in Pascal at that point. So the 9060 XT is sort of, it's bringing that market segment forwards quite a bit. Like they could have just released a very mediocre, again, small performance increase, not enough VRAM. But for $350, you're getting enough VRAM to last you. The performance uplift over previous models is quite good.
Mhm.
And there's no way to be fair, there is no way I'd be ranking this card first if there wasn't for features like FSR4. Like
Mhm.
it just wouldn't get that ranking. But because AMD is actually putting in effort to features, and again, like I think I've seen enough evidence now over the last couple of months that we're getting enough movement on the FSR4 game front that it's not like they've just released FSR4 with the launch titles and then nothing.
Mhm.
It's like not every single big release comes out with FSR4 support, but there is more than I think we've ever seen from FSR titles day one. Even
Yep.
things like the Cyberpunk patch, you had to wait like a week or two to access FSR4 support after they added it in, but that's available now. So that there's things like that. So I think
Okay, so if the 9060 XT we think we're probably going to put above the 5090,
yeah,
what the hell are we doing with the 9070 XT and 5070 Ti?
yeah. I guess do we think that's better than a 5090 or worse than a 5090? So
Again, that sort of falls into the same category as the 9060 XT. Like I would be comfortable recommending a friend buy a 5070 Ti or a 9070 XT in favor of a 5090 just because the pricing is so absurd, but
mhm.
that's more from a value focused perspective. So it's just,
Yeah, it's hard. I think
but forget the 5090 for a moment.
yeah.
We have to narrow down which one's going first, the 5070 Ti or the 9070 XT. It's a situation again where if the 9070 XT is, it's meant to be 25% better value. Or sorry, the GeForce GPU is actually meant to cost 25% more rather.
Mm.
They deliver similar performance, but yeah, the pricing's just shambles depending on where you look. It can be the GeForce GPU is just 11% more in the US, but then it's 25% more in Australia. So
Yeah, I think it's really hard to separate. I think the thing that would sort of split the two for me is since the launch of both models, if we went like week by week as an example, how often are we sort of saying buy the 5070 Ti or buy the 9070 XT? I think
yeah, okay.
at the launch of each model, right, the 5070 Ti was pretty much never $750. If you got right in at that like microsecond that it was available at $600, the 9070 XT there was more supply of $600 models. Since then, though, I think there was at least a few months there where the 5070 Ti was clearly better value because the 9070 XT was it was very close to a 5070 Ti in pricing. And it's starting to separate a bit more, especially outside the US, as you said, in Australia and Europe, sort of. But I think if I was going week by week since launch, I would have been recommending a 5070 Ti more often. And for that reason, I would put it ahead. But I
Uh,
don't think we're talking like a huge margin.
Ideally, I would have them pretty well equal. But since we can't do that, then yeah, I tend to agree that the 9070 XT, it promised a lot, but it's to date it's sort of fallen a bit short of that in especially in the US, but in quite a few regions. And I know price is improving all the time, but as we've seen, the 5070 Ti price, at least at the time of filming this video, has also improved. So it's not like it's
Yeah.
staying at $900 US. So let's go with that then. I think 9070 XT would be fourth, and 5070 Ti probably third. So
So we're committing to having the 5090 in second then. Is
it
that what we're
seems
saying?
it seems like it. Again, the 5090 is one of those products where we could have really justified and made pretty convincing arguments for putting just about anywhere in here.
Yeah.
Probably not below the 8 GB graphics cards. That might be a stretch, but I think anywhere between where the 5080 was positioned and the 9060 XT, I really could see the 5090 anywhere in that range. But I probably feel more comfortable with it being in second, to be honest.
Yeah. I think there's a few things going for it to put into second, as opposed to ranking it, say, fourth and shifting up the 5070 Ti and 9070 XT. I think the one thing that comes to mind is the 5070 Ti in second doesn't feel right. I feel like that's too high for a model that, it's not the worst card or anything. It's just that didn't really shift the needle forward all that much. It's one of the weaker performance gains over the previous generation. Still, like 16 gig of VRAM is fine for that model, but again, it's not like you're getting more than the previous generation. It's just okay for a high-end product. The 9070 XT is more impressive in its price and things like that, but we've discussed why we've ranked that lower. So, if you're ranking the 5070 Ti in second, then there must be a lot of mediocre cards below that. And to be fair, there are. But then, the 5090, again, like has one of the more impressive performance gains relative to the previous generation out of the 50 series specifically. There's no competition for it. So in that price range, it's the obvious buy. I think that, when we were going back to like why we put the 9060 XT 16 gig in first, is because it's the obvious buy in that price point. The 5090 is also the obvious buy in the price point that it sits in. And then you get to the 5070 Ti 9070 XT. Now there's, which way do you go? It's not a clear buy. And same with like 5070, 5060 Ti 16 gigabyte, and you go further down the stack. It's like, it's like you could buy that, but there's other options. So if we're ranking it sort of based on like what's the most obvious buys in each price point, the 5090 definitely deserves to be in second. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would have guessed it would turn out this way, but yeah, I'm pretty happy with the rankings having worked through it.
Yeah, so just to recap, for the final rankings that we've decided upon, the definitive, extremely important GPU rankings, in first place, we've got the Radeon RX 9060 XT 16 gigabyte, then the GeForce RTX 5090, then the 5070 Ti 9070 XT 5070 5060 Ti 16 gigabyte. That's in sixth, so halfway. In the bottom half, we've got the 9070 in seventh, the 5080, 5060, 9060 XT 8 gigabyte, and then the bottom two models, the 5050 and last, the 5060 Ti 8 gigabyte. So those are our rankings for now. And it would have been way more complicated if we added in those two GPUs we hadn't tested. So thankfully, we didn't decide to do that.
Yeah, didn't want to deal with those.
All right. Well, that is going to do it for this part of this podcast. Let's take a break. We'll come back and talk about our boring lives. All right, Steve, we're back. We can talk about our boring lives. Now, I do have a little bit of housekeeping stuff, I guess, to get through first. One of those is thanks to everyone that listened to our Daniel Owen episode last week. Some really good reception for that one. I think, he was a great guest to have on and really appreciated him finding the time. I think it just worked out super well for timing since he's a very busy guy. But yeah, good to see a nice reception on that. Second is that I am going on holiday next week, so we'll have no podcasts until early September. So just taking a couple of weeks off to head off to Europe. So I will be away, no podcast in that time. Enjoy the time off for people to do some other stuff, I guess. Steve, you can work on some other things and I don't have to pull you away from your busy life. But we'll be back in the first week of September for podcasts after this one. So there's just those two things to get out of the way. What's been happening? Actually, I saw your video on the construction work that you did in your daughter's bedroom.
Yes. Yep.
And I thought I saw the in progress construction last time I was out at your place.
Oh yeah, I forgot I showed you that.
Yeah, you showed me it's sort of in progress. The final thing I reckon looks awesome.
Cheers.
Yeah, the video is really cool to watch. Obviously not the sort of usual stuff we make on Hardware Unbox, but yeah, the final, I thought it turned out really well. So yeah, good job on that one.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'm really happy with it. And Zoe obviously loves it. She's thanked me a trillion times since she's moved in there, and she doesn't like to leave her room at this point, but no, it's worked out really well. And yeah, she's really enjoying it. So yeah, it's good. It was something that I didn't plan on filming or making a video of, to be honest, because it just makes it quite a bit more hard work having to film all of it. But then the way we ended up doing it, it wasn't too intrusive to the whole build process. It gave you like a glimpse of what we were doing without going through the whole thing, which honestly would have probably been an hour-long video. And yeah, really, I was just after some monitors to upgrade. She had a 27-inch monitor, just a single one, which I'd actually just bought about a year or two ago because the 27-inch one she started with died. So
was that ViewSonic one from ages ago?
I think it was a ViewSonic. I bought 3 of them. And
because that was a really good value model back in sort of like the 2020 era, around that sort of time, I thought.
Yeah, possibly a little bit further back. I'm not
I
sure.
think
But
it could have
yeah,
been. Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, it was quite a while ago I bought them, so it did last quite a while. But then, yeah, one of the three failed, because I've got two daughters. They were using one, and then I had a third sort of spare computer they were in the kitchen. All of them were side by side. It was a really cool, clean setup. And so if they had a friend come over or whatever, and if it was a rainy day and I couldn't kick them outside, they could play some games together or whatever. So I used to do that with my mates. I thought that'd be kind of cool. And they did that from time to time. Not a lot, but occasionally. So in the end, we ended up just plucking the third guest screen, and she used that for a while. But obviously, Balin's got 3 monitors. I've got 3 monitors. I've sort of technically got 5, but 3 of them are connected to my main PC. And then even here where I sit when I game, I've got 2 monitors and 2 computers. So that's even more extreme. But so I was like, oh, one day it'd be really cool to have, dual monitors. And that's sort of what she was asking for her birthday. And to be clear, she wasn't asking for the bedroom renovation or anything. She was sort of, for years, she's been like, when can I game in my bedroom so she doesn't have to sit next to her sister who's, talking to her friends and stuff. And we were like, well, when you get to 13. And anyway, we ended up softening that and got it at 12, because she's been doing very well with this.
Well, in Australia, you go to high school when you're 12?
Yes.
Yeah,
she'll be at high school next year. So that's sort of the reasoning. My wife thought, well, if we get her in now, sort of, by high school, she'll be in her room and stuff. And she's been doing really well at school. She's been performing well, and there's been no dramas with her. She's been well behaved. So we thought, you know what, we'll make it for her 12th birthday. And so I just wanted to get her, she likes the 32-inch monitors I have. And so I sort of reached out, and I wasn't even probing that much. I was just sort of, RMSI contact. I was like, oh, I'm building Zoe a new room, and, what, how can we be involved? And I said, well, I was thinking of getting her some screens. I was actually at that point thinking I might just even buy them because it'd just be easier, and I didn't really want to make a video. But then when they got really excited by the idea and that, and, they wanted to provide these OLED monitors, which I looked at, I'm like, damn, they're pretty cool. And then they wanted to provide a PC upgrade, which, admittedly she wasn't in desperate need of. So just to be clear, but
yeah, just YouTuber things on that one, I reckon.
It really was, but it was pretty cool hardware. And some of it I really wanted to check out, like that AIO that we saw at Computex.
Yeah.
So I was like, you know what, let's just go for that. We'll do it. And, we were transparent in the video that was provided by MSI. I saw one comment, someone was like, oh, I can't wait for the highly critical, next MSI review. And I was like, don't worry, bud, we got you covered. If MSI release a bad product, we're going to fry it hard. And MSI know they're fair game on that. It doesn't buy them any, goodwill or anything like that. For them, I suppose it's just product placement. We didn't use a competitor's product. So that's the win for them. But yeah, look, if MSI release a dodgy motherboard, or if they do something dodgy or whatever, and it falls within our wheelhouse, we'll absolutely be going after them and exposing it to its fullest. So so anyway, that's how that came to be. A lot of the stuff in the video I did purchase myself. Obviously, we paid for all the building supplies, the Blue Eddy, a few things like that. So that's the thing that I use as the UPS. Paid for all of that. But yeah, we got the monitors and the PC from MSI and a couple of the peripherals. So yeah, grateful for all of that from them. And I think we made a pretty cool video with it. And yeah, really happy with the end result. So so I worked on the room for about a week, but it wasn't a full week. Obviously, it was I took a day here or half a day or a couple of hours because I was still having to make content, test Threadripper, do all that sort of stuff. So it was really, I just threw whatever time of the night or day that I had to throw at it. So by the time we got to, and the other thing was, I said to Zoe, look, because the other reason I did the video was for Zoe, because as you know, all she ever wants to do is appear on the Hardware Unbox channel, or, we've let her on a live stream briefly before, because that's all she wants to do. She just wants to do the YouTube thing. It's funny because I put her in front of the camera and then she doesn't actually know what to say, but she doesn't think that far ahead, but she just wants to do it so badly. She loves the channel. She watches all of our videos and stuff. It's pretty crazy. So
even I don't do that, so that's impressive.
Yeah, she's just really into it. So part of the 12th birthday present was making the YouTube video, because when I suggested to her, she didn't really care about the upgraded computer or even the monitors as much as she did that we got to make a video. about it.
Okay.
As weird as that might sound. So that was part of the present. And yeah, so that's pretty much why I ended up filming it as well, just so, Zoe got that. And I told her, look, you can't peek or look into the room. It has to be a surprise because it's not going to play off on camera if you've seen it or you know what's happening. So prior to starting the build, we sat down. I designed the room with her roughly what she wanted because obviously I want to make the room to how she wants it. And so that's essentially we agreed on like the desk that goes along, the way the bed was made, all of that. We worked that out beforehand. I was like, okay. And she mentioned that she'd like that slatted timber. She really likes that look. We sort of used that in the gym behind the sauna TV. It was a darker timber. She was like, oh, a lighter timber would look really cool. I'm like, yeah, maybe I'll do that. I'll look into it. So of course I did that, but I didn't want her to know I'd done that. And so it was a bit of a pain in the backside because I had to hide all the offcuts and all the stuff. So I was putting it like in her wardrobe because we gutted that for the renovation. So whenever I cut the slatted paneling, I had to like get the offcuts, tidy that up so she didn't see it when she got home from school. And I told her, even though, she's a good kid, she'll do what she's told, but I couldn't risk it. I was like, I've set up a webcam in your room. If you even peek through that door and have a look, that's it, the deal's off. And she's like, I won't, I promise. I'm like, all right. But I'm like, just so you know, there's a webcam in there, which of course there wasn't, but
of course.
So I was certain she wouldn't, but at the same time, she was like, I want to see it so bad. I'm like, well, you just have to be patient. So got it all done. And there was a few reasons for why we couldn't do it on the Monday. It had to be Tuesday just for scheduling and stuff. She had things on after school and that. So I said, look, we're going to do it on Tuesday. It'll be ready. Just be patient. And so Tuesday I had to do the final touches while she was at school and get it ready. So when she got home from school, Balin and I could film it. And that's what you guys ultimately ended up seeing. As she had her old computer, I thought, you know what? She's got so much stuff on there and it all works fine, but it is a different platform. I'll clone that SSD. So we've got 2 versions of it. I'll put that into her new PC and, hopefully I can get that all working. So I cloned the SSD. The clone was successful. It booted straight into Windows on the new computer. And then it was just ran like garbage. You click the start button, it would take like 5 seconds to respond, and that would load like how the internet used to load in the 90s. I was like, what the hell? And I installed the AMD chipset driver, I installed the GeForce driver, and then it would run really well for about 15 seconds and then just hit a brick wall. And so I've reset it. I'm trying everything, and like this, if you listen to this, it's like, well, why wouldn't you have done a fresh install, or why wouldn't you have done a full cleanup before? And it's like, well, I had a heap of things to do. I was under the pump and I had a 12-year-old that was super excited and knew the deadline was like by 4 o'clock that day when she got home from school. And I had a heap of other stuff to do that day as well. So I was kind of under the pump and I just needed this to work. And so it wasn't. So anyway, long story short, actually, no, I won't do a long story short. So I'm struggling to get this thing working, Tim. And so there may have been some swear words said while I'm trying to get it done. That's yeah, you know how that goes.
Oh yeah.
Very upset that it's just running like garbage. And, again, I haven't exhausted all resources, but I just needed it to work so I could go on and do the other things that I need to work on. So I'm like, far out. I'm just, so I was loading something up, which was taking ages. And I thought I've got to do some other stuff. So I'll run out to the studio and keep doing that. So I ran out to the studio and my triple monitors, 2 of them are black and 1 of them's in the BIOS. I'm like, why is my computer in the BIOS? Like, it just never does that. So I reboot the system. It goes straight back into the BIOS. I'm like, is it not finding the storage? And then there's no storage detected in the BIOS. I'm like, what the hell? What's going on here? Is the SSD come loose or something? I go to take the SSD cover off on the, I'm actually using a Z890 motherboard. I changed to a Core Ultra 7 CPU about 3 months ago just to test drive that. I decided to give the 9950X3D a rest, just to see what the Intel thing's all about. And that had been going fine. Actually, really, really good experience on the Intel platform. I had a flawless experience with Ryzen, but go to take the SSD cover off. I swear the thing was like 200 degrees. Like, it was I've never ever touched metal that I hadn't just welded that was that hot. Like, when you get like a 5090 or something cooking and you touch the back plate, you're like, ooh, that it was like twice as hot as that. like
Mm.
insane. So I had to get a pair of like welding gloves on, managed to remove the the M.2 SSD cover, the heatsink, put that thing down somewhere it wouldn't burn a hole in my desk. And the controller on the SSD was just covered in liquid. So it had got so hot that it had pushed all the moisture out of the thermal pad and it just gone all over the SSD. Looked like water cooling had leaked. So essentially, the M.2, it's a Gen 5 SSD, had just failed and just cooked itself, completely fried.
You need one of those little heat sinks with the fan on it.
Well, I don't think it died due to thermals. I don't know for sure. I think it just had a critical failure, which resulted in it just burning up. But I don't think it was thermal runaway, but I don't know. But also that SSD was I've been using that SSD for over a year without a single hiccup. It's been in 2 different systems and it had been in the Intel system for about 3 months. Bang. The worst part about that was I got all this work to do and my computer's just donezo. Like I've lost everything technically. Thankfully, most of the stuff is saved on the NAS. But also, when I did move to the system 3 months ago, I cloned my 4 terabyte SSD to a Gen 4 SSD just as in case things go wrong. And thankfully, I hadn't written over that. So I managed to get that out, plug it in, update a few things that needed updating. Most of it was cloud-based or on the NAS. And so I don't think I've lost anything. There was actually a video I'd been working on, and for some reason I'd accidentally saved the Excel file to my C drive and not the NAS, which I never, ever, ever, ever do. And quite literally, maybe an hour before the thing burnt up, I realized it was on the C drive because I couldn't find it on the NAS, and I saved it to the NAS. And it was like a week's worth of work.
Oh, very lucky.
Unbelievably lucky. So I'm very grateful for that. And thankfully I had a clone, put it in, configured all the drivers, got it set up, and it was a waste. But that was just like, and then on top of that, my wife took a new car out. She was driving to go to gym because she still likes to go to gym to catch up with her friends and stuff. And a tradie lost his load of paint in front of her on the road. And she had nowhere to go. Like it's, one of those back country roads it's a mid corner. Yeah. And so she had to like veer off the road. Thankfully it's an SUV, but half of the car ran through it. And it was just like white paint filled the wheel arches, covered the rims, covered the tires, sprayed up the side of the car. Thankfully only one side of the car. So meanwhile, she spent like 3 hours having to clean that while I'm trying to get Zoe's computer going while restoring my old computer. And then I still had to get to the work I had to do that day. So it was just a fun day. I was doing a lot of swearing that day. So that was my day. It happens in 3s, I guess, and they were my 3 disasters of the day.
So no 7 months in a shop to get that paint off?
No, she eventually got it all off because it's relatively fresh. The cars are clear coated and that, but it's not a fun process. You have to obviously be careful and it takes a while. But so she did a really good job of that. I would have liked to have helped, but she knew that I had to get Zoe's thing done. That was really the priority even for her. But yeah, it was just a fun little morning when all of that things happen. But anyway, could be much worse. So in the end of the day, it was all rectified inside of a day, so it wasn't that bad. But yeah, that was that. So what's your story, Tim?
Oh, well, no, I don't really have any stories because, I'm just about to go away, really. So I've just been chilling out doing nothing. So, no exciting stories, really. So it's good that you had a few things to talk about. But, when I get back, hopefully there'll be a few more interesting things to talk about. But that'll be, probably going against the boring life section, wouldn't it? If I go on a holiday for a few weeks, I'll be doing exciting things. That's not boring. So I guess I won't have to talk about it. So
yeah, you've really ruined it. So I'm going to have to do a lot of really extra boring stuff.
Yeah, I'll have to talk about like the food on the plane and that sort of thing. But yeah, anyway, nothing's been happening out here really. Nothing crazy. Same old stuff. Just doing work. And yeah, Adelaide Crows are doing well in the footy this year. So that's been keeping me busy in sort of the outside times. I think they'll make finals for the first time in 7 years. So I'm pretty excited about that. That'll be good. And unfortunately, your Melbourne Demons have been pretty bad. They just sacked the coach as well. So,
which I'm not upset about. But I'm confident. I think they've got a good roster. I think they can,
the
bit of
playing list is
restructuring.
good. I also agreed that the coach should have been sacked. So, interesting.
Probably, a little while ago. It's probably difficult because they did win the premiership, but yeah, it's been a rough few years to say the least.
Well, not as rough as being an Adelaide supporter for the last 7. I think you've had it not too bad, but they've slid away.
No, I mean rough in the sense that, in my opinion, they have a very talented group.
They've underperformed. They've underperformed.
A lot of highly talented players, and they've just managed to do very little to nothing with it. Certainly nothing this season. Hey, I remain positive for the future, Tim. It's like next generation GPUs.
Yeah, I think
I'll remain positive until I'm ultimately crushed.
Well, I think there's some good young players coming through, so I think they'll be okay. But you never know. If they decide to do like a full clean out or something, then they'll be obviously very different. But so anyway, that's it for this week's episode of the Hardware Unboxed podcast. Hopefully everyone's enjoyed this sort of GPU ranking discussion. Usually it's always a bit of a fun one, that one. So like I said, we'll be back in September for the next episode, so stay tuned for that one. We've also got Patreon. If you want to support Hardware Unboxed, you get access to the supporter feed, ad-free, all that sort of thing. So check that out. But thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.